So just how do you go about learning your Latin set text? This is probably not something that you've faced in any other subject, this level of rote learning, and it can be a real challenge. So here are some hints and tips for how to go about it. Just to give you an idea of how I work with my students, I tend to present them with something very straightforward. So they have the Latin on one side, my suggested English translation on the other. And then what we do as a class is use highlighters. So as a class, I will go through with them and I will present them with the text and I will give them the English and the Latin highlighted to show really clearly how one maps onto the other. And of course, it's my narrations of these highlighted versions of the text that may have drawn you to me on YouTube. So you can use my narrations, you can use the PowerPoint version, and you can create your own highlighted version of the text. So my students or you will end up with a highlighted version. You will have the Latin highlighted alongside the English, and that is a really clear way of showing you how the English translation maps onto the Latin text, and that is absolutely crucial. It's no good learning the English translation in isolation. You must see how it relates to the text that you're going to be questioned on. So learning the English translation is worth doing. It's a useful prop, but do remember it is just a prop. It's the Latin that you ultimately have to relate to. So in terms of learning the English translation, how do you do it? Well, it's very important to break it up into very small chunks. And by chunks, I mean, a sentence, really small. Learn each separately as you go and only progress to the next one when you're really confident with the first, the second, and so on. How do you learn it? Well, reading out loud, reciting out loud, very powerful. Some students find that moving around while they do so, either just the process of moving or perhaps because they associate certain bits of their room or bits of the garden or wherever it is that they're working with particular bits of the text. Some people find that really powerful. But do try recitation for sure. Also, get people to test you. It does not matter if they don't know any Latin. So please don't feel that because no one in your family or among your friends are studying Latin that they can't help you, because they can. Get them to test you on the English translation. Give them the translation and get them to ask you to recite it and get them to interrupt you every time you slip up. So you really can get people to help you even when they don't have any knowledge of the Latin. And that can be really useful. But ultimately, you've got to bear in mind that this English translation that you're rote learning has got to map onto the Latin. So how do we go about getting a little bit more confident with that? Well, some students have created some really amazing resources in the past. This was a wonderful student, ended up with an A star. She created some flashcards that she was kind enough to share with the rest of the class, and she kind of carried these around with her all the time. So she was able to do small bursts of revision, in times in form time or on the bus or wherever. And I think she found that really helpful, and I know that a lot of other students use them as well. Something that I do with my students every single year, and I think is one of the most powerful things that you can do, is approach the text in small sections. Present it to yourself like this. I've created this in a Word document using a table. You can do the same. All you need from your teacher is the Latin and the English translation that you are being asked to learn. If she can give you those electronically, or he can give you those electronically, then you can create this for yourself. So what I do with my students is I present them with these cut up into sections. And the idea is that you start with the English. So first of all, you would try piecing the English together. So this could be part of the process of learning, or testing yourself when you've done a little bit of rote learning and recitation. Then, once you've got confident with that, the next stage is to map the Latin onto the English. So that is where you're getting to the point where you're recognizing how the Latin relates to the English and allowing yourself to piece it together. And you should do that multiple times. You should do it to the point where it's too easy. Yeah, you find it really straightforward. Then your ultimate goal is to be able to piece the Latin in isolation from the English, piece the Latin together. And that is where you're getting to the point where you recognize the Latin, and the English translation is just a running commentary, a kind of prop that's in the back of your mind. You don't have to have it in front of your eyes to benefit from it. And that's where you're really getting to the point where you're going to see the benefits. Again, do this multiple times until it becomes too easy. Make sure that you are able to recite each piece, present yourself or your working partner with a piece at random, ask them what it means. You can use these pieces in all sorts of different ways. Really, really worth doing. So if you don't have anything like this and you think that cutting up lots of bits of paper is something you don't have time for, you can do similar activities on Quizlet. So if you go to this address, you'll find the resources that I've created. And again, I have put little tiny sections of the text together with their English translation, put it onto Quizlet and ask the quiz team to test students matching the Latin to the English, English to Latin, and so on. So this is a screen capture of their matching exercise. So you have to drag one towards the other and they disappear from the screen. It's all very clever. There are all sorts of other activities. So this is the learn feature where some of the questions start up as multiple choice, and then as you progress through your learning, the questions get a little bit more challenging. So I'm a big fan of Quizlet. I think it's a fantastic learning tool. Just bear in mind that it's a bit like Wikipedia. Anyone and everyone can put something on there, and there are some things that are a bit odd. So to finish, just a couple of things to bear in mind. Can't emphasize enough that learning the English translation is only a prop. It's a powerful prop and I highly recommend it. But the important thing is you must be able to map that English translation onto the Latin. You've got to be able to recognize the Latin word for word, otherwise you're going to be wasting your time. Also, bear in mind that the sections that I've created or your teacher may have created are artificial. So don't refer to them in your exam. And also, as you progress through your learning, you do need to make sure that you can recognize parts of the text that may run between what I've called two separate sections. So that's crucial too. And finally, do bear in mind that there is no one correct absolute translation of your text. The translation that I've produced for my students is going to vary from the one that your teacher has produced, the one you may have produced as a class, and others that you may find online. There is no set version. If you're going to rote learn a translation, it's probably best to stick with one, but that's only for the purpose of learning. It doesn't make it the only correct version. Best of luck with your learning, and do get in touch if I can help.